Jesus. I am one of your hosts, George Tarrant, alongside the man, the myth, the non-fascist, Mr. Travis Croft. He has nothing to do with the railroads.
Nor do I control the flow of commerce, it should be noted. It's life is sticking it in and breaking it off for everybody at the moment. So I am not alone on that front. But we are here. We're back. We have not given up yet.
Nope. We are the channel that God cannot quit.
He's tried. I mean, the weather. Whenever I try and visit George up in the hills, has always been.
Yep.
God's made his point, really.
Yeah, not notoriously bad weather. Now, we have got a show for you today, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about this week's chain movie, which was my choice, following on from Bob Roberts last time with Lincoln, Steven Spielberg's 2012 movie, I believe it was. We have got the newer release of Sympathy for the Devil with Joel Kinnaman and Nicolas Cage. And this time, so many years ago, we visit 1993's Christopher Lambert sci-fi Fortress. So let's get straight into it, shall we? Lincoln. Lincoln is the Daniel Day-Lewis starring as the Honest Abe for a long gestating Lincoln biopic story that Steven Spielberg's wanted to put out. And it's got one hell of a cast. It's like almost.
That's putting it lightly, I think, to say it's got one. It's got the cast.
Yeah, it's putting kind of like the likes of Oppenheimer to shame for it. It's like, oh yeah, I recognize that person in a momentary cameo that has gone on to win an Oscar or whatever. But yeah, so for those who don't know what Lincoln is, you kind of need to buff up on a little bit of your American Civil War history to be able to truly understand this film on any deep level, because this is the American Civil War continuing to rage. America's presidential struggle, President Abraham Lincoln struggles with continuing carnage on the battlefield as he fights with many inside his own cabinet on the decision to emancipate the slaves. Turning point in history, to put it
And of course, it's famous, as you mentioned, directed by Steven Spielberg, written by his often collaborator these days, Tony Kushner. And Doris Kearns Goodwin gets a writing nod. She wrote the book this was very loosely based on. Tony Kushner, of course, was nominated for an Academy Award earlier in the year for Meeting the Freedmans? Spielberg's latest film.
Yes, that's right.
So he's usual behind the camera crew for Spielberg.
Yep.
It'd been something he'd been working on the idea for a long time. And the initial casting choice was an interesting one. It was going to be Irish actor Liam Neeson as Abraham Lincoln initially, before we ended up with Daniel Day-Lewis, who initially didn't want to do it.
Interesting. But there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, the titular character is Daniel Day-Lewis, one of the most well-regarded actors of our generation, shall we say, apart from sometimes he goes a little too far with like what was that Paul W.S. Anderson movie about the thread needle or something?
Phantom Thread?
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, you have no idea how close you came to that being this week's movie.
Ooh.
I haven't seen it, but apparently it's pretty good.
I've heard that it's a slog. But anyway.
I think yes. The Daniel Day-Lewis movie, so, you know.
We have got, as Mary Lincoln, we've got the Sally Field of it all. We have got Joseph Gordon-Levitt playing one of the sons of Abraham Lincoln, Robert Lincoln, David Strathairn, James Spader, Hal Holbrook, Tommy Lee Jones, John Hawke, Bruce McGill, Jackie L. Haley, Tim Blake Nelson. We have got Lee Pace in quite a substantial role, Jared Harris. And those are just off the very top. You can keep going down the list and suddenly you'll go, oh, everyone who's anyone in 2012 was in this movie. We talked off air before we started And I apologize to my co-host, ladies and gentlemen. I truly did, because I didn't realize this was such a long movie of 2.5 hours, and it makes you feel those 2.5 hours, because this is very much a talkie, and this is about a man who likes to talk. So you are privy to a multitude of delightful, charming stories from Abraham Lincoln, to the point where one of the characters even gets pissy and shouts and storms off because it's not another one of your blasted stories. And this is a movie that takes its time, but in my opinion, doesn't actually tell much of a story. It just tells you about the time. Good performances overall, if safe in their representations of some iconic characters. But unless you know a good amount about this, of who these people are, they don't really mention themselves by name too much, or they don't really refer to each other too well. And it's very courtroom drama-y.
It's talky. I'll pay that much.
Yeah. Oh,
I didn't find myself as bored as I thought I might have been when I was like, 2.5 hours of Americans jerking off over their president. Like, that didn't sound attractive to me, and I think that was probably why I'd never seen it before now.
same.
The same reason, I mean, I didn't like Hamilton very much. Like, I mean, I don't like musicals a great deal, so that kind of fits. But like, everyone else like, oh my god, it's such a wonderful show, and you're like, but it's basically, again, 3 hours of him jerking off about how great America is, and you kind of look over the pond now, or our pond, Pacific, and go, it's not looking good, guys.
Yeah.
You know,
America.
it's not looking good. So I found that difficult to swallow with Hamilton, and I was afraid that was what Lincoln was going to be.
Yeah.
And there were moments of like, oh, hero worship of like Lincoln and stuff like that, and him doing cool shit. I can't specifically recall any off the top of my head because it was 2 weeks ago. I watched this now. That's what happens when we get to later week. I forget things. But they were less than thought they were going to be. It was not as much of that kind of hero worship, but as I thought it was going to be. Not as much jerking off about how great he was. What I did find a little cloying was the performance. I mean, he did a fantastic job. I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis is worth the price of admission here for me alone, in the sense that he disappears into his characters.
He always does.
Like whatever one that comes to mind is Bill the Butcher in the Gangs of New York, where he had to invent that accent because no one knew what the accent was like then. But like, I've been known on the show to say criticize Leo DiCaprio in a sense. I don't think he's that great of an actor. He's a good actor, but I think he very rarely disappears into a role. You never forget you're watching Leo DiCaprio playing a cowboy or a Wall Street broker or whatever. He's just Leo DiCaprio doing Leo DiCaprio things.
Yeah.
Unless you talk about something like, for me, I know it's off topic, but the last Tarantino film, I thought he did probably one of the better performances I've seen from him. And I kind of, for the first time ever, forgot I was watching him. And this is what Daniel Day-Lewis brings to this role, in it. He just disappears into it. But at the same time, I don't know if these were his choices or a director's, but exactly how Lincoln was. It was like, well, I'm just a small town country lawyer, and my country lawyer ways in the big city here, and them telling you, well, I met a man once who had a mule with a spinning wheel, and and it was just like, and I enjoyed the characters in the film were like, oh, not this shit again. He's going to tell the story.
Yeah.
And like, maybe that's how he was. Like, I mean, I assume they did some pretty serious research into the character before they did it. Like they had the historical accuracy wasn't top of mind in a lot of points. I think, but I assume they tried to encapsulate the character as he was remembered in books and stuff like that. And but I found that kind of like, I always thought of the the space chicken lawyer from Futurama. Uh, yeah, um,
It's,
um,
it's true though. It's like I'm just a happy chicken.
it's
But
like, it's just it was, and I kind of struggled to take it seriously. It was just kind of silly.
that is part of the problem as well. I mean, how often have there been parodies of Abraham Lincoln in so many things? Like there's a bit again in Futurama where one of the robots in the robot insane asylum is, I was born in 200 log cabins. It's it's just it's one of those roles that you just kind of go, okay, I've seen this a million times, and the parodies. It's the Godfather effect, I suppose.
Or was it Adolf Linkleiter or whatever it was in Rick and Morty, where Rick merges DNA from Abraham Lincoln and Hitler, and it's so I mean, the parody side of things maybe is a little bit much, but
Yeah,
um, in a lot of ways, this followed I like the formula I like for a biopic, though. Like we've talked about it ad nauseum. Whenever we talk biopic, we mention Jobs,
yeah.
the Steve Jobs film, of the Sorkin one, not the
Mhm,
Ashton Kutcher one.
mhm.
In it, they picked those particular moments of just Steve Jobs' life, rather than trying to tell it from
Yeah,
start to finish. We picked an interesting moment, like Oppenheimer did, really, and
yeah.
it didn't tell all of
His whole
Oppenheimer's life.
life.
It picked crucial moments and went through that kind of told, where he came from, why he was famous, and what happened to him.
Mm,
And I guess in this show, they tried to do the same thing in the sense that we have not tried to tell the whole story of Lincoln. It's not him as a boy or anything. We're telling the story of how he passed the 13th Amendment,
yeah,
which is, uh, I guess, kind of an interesting story, but it basically turns into a movie about political machinations
yeah.
in the middle of a civil war. So, I
Which is
mean, no,
not really much in the way of the war depicted, which I think maybe some people might have anticipated there being because of Spielberg's success with um, Saving Private Ryan and Schindler's List, where he did depict more of that on boots on the ground kind of violence. This was away from the front lines, and we saw the ramifications of it and the depiction, the little depictions of the front lines of the Civil War looked brutal. They really did. There was elements like there's the sequence right near the start, I think it is, where someone's having a boot put in their face into the mud and the water, and it just keeps on going. It's like, holy shit, that's violent. Like the D-Day landings and stuff. It it was harrowing, but so much of it was kind of taken away. There's this we're painted this beautiful background, and then it goes into courtroom drama. It's like, okay, why? Because you're not really showing. I felt like throughout the stages, it never really. I never felt like it was keeping Lincoln up at night, keeping the war, having the war still going. And even when Robert, his son, played by
Gordon
yeah,
Levitt.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt, um, even then it was sort of like, okay, this feels cliched. That sort of like, I don't want my son going off and dying. This, I'm going to blame you. It was sort of like, okay, this is an interesting split of the story that they're telling. I didn't quite understand why, and I felt like
Um,
it slowed it down.
how, in the sense you didn't feel authentic, you think those kind of
I
arguments are?
Yeah, and I felt like a lot. Sally Field, I love as an actress generally, but I felt like her portrayal in this was so fucking over dramatic, cliche, and I I didn't feel like that performance married up with Daniel Day-Lewis's or the side elements that they were showing of the front lines. Like it felt disjointed. Of Spielberg said, wanting to show how vicious and violent, and in so many ways, this American Civil War being arguably more violent than World War II, which he so successfully depicted. But he wasn't telling that story. He wasn't telling a frontline story. He was telling a story about a general who, commander-in-chief, who didn't seem to fucking care beyond the political side of it. And I get the point of his stance on that, of we need to get through this because it's not just for now, it's for the future. Very good point. But it just didn't gel as a holistic story for me.
I'm not sure I can appreciate that. I felt like it came together reasonably well. I can see how you might find it a bit talky. That's certainly true. And I don't know that there was a lot of intrigue there because we know it got passed, right? So the 30th Amendment's a thing. So,
Well, the South won.
that would have been an much more interesting twist, wouldn't it?
That
I
would have been
don't
Michael
remember
Caine.
the South winning, but like maybe that was just the media, the mainstream media wants you to believe they lost, and it didn't bother me quite so much that I didn't know who everybody was. I kind of figured it out. Like, I am no means people who watch the show a lot might know a bit of a history buff as well. But like in Civil War's not exactly my area of expertise. I did watch the Ken Burns documentary back in the early 2000s on the Civil War. If you are interested in learning more about the Civil War itself, I'd recommend that. But I don't remember the names and faces. Obviously, we get Lincoln, and that was about it, really.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess I just kind of figured it out. Like, I mean, they told me, they gave me enough information to figure out that Tommy Lee Jones was, who was fantastic in this, by the way.
He was great.
Wonderful performance from Tommy Lee Jones, but he was a full abolitionist. Who was kind of, to, I guess, from our perspective, to the left of Lincoln. And we had Lee Pace and his crew who were vehemently anti-abolitionist. It was, pro-slaver states, and they were on what we considered the right of Lincoln. And that dynamic, you had James Spader, who was also fantastic in this, by the way.
Yes.
And he was basically Lincoln's bagman, really. He was going around and buying votes for his constitutional amendment. At least they were open about it back then. So I didn't struggle quite so much with figuring out who was who. I didn't need to know who Tommy Lee Jones's character was necessarily to know what his motivations were, and why he was doing what he was doing. I mean, I thought it was fascinating, the scene where he's sort of forced to take a position contrary to the one he actually has about whether or not he wants to give African Americans the right to vote, or it's just a legal equality that he's been arguing for, and that political tactic that he has to make to stand up and say that no, I don't want them to give him a vote, when he absolutely does, just in order to keep to win this minor political battle, in the sense that he knew was another battle that would help win the greater war that he wanted to win. So I mean, but being also a fan of politics and a fan of history, maybe that kind of thing's more in my wheelhouse than a lot of other people. So it didn't bother me quite so much that about the talkiness. The one performance that really didn't click for me was like you with Sally Field. I felt like she was in a different film. I also felt like, I mean, this is going to sound horrible, I felt like she was way too old. If you read the trivia on IMDb, apparently she was 10 years older than Daniel Day-Lewis, and she was 20 years older than the actual Mrs. Lincoln. So I obviously didn't know that before the film came, but I just felt like she looks older than him. She seems older than him. I mean, if that was the way the relationship really was, then that makes sense, but it wasn't. So I just didn't, and you sort of said she was this melodramatic role, which I understand she was quite a melodramatic person. Her son had her committed to an asylum later in her life. So that was maybe a choice, but I really struggled with her. I think my interest level in the film dropped every time she was on screen. I thought she was just possibly completely out of place amongst the rest of his cast.
I agree. I feel like there was a lot of extra that maybe is historically accurate to have these people in the picture, so to speak. But I feel like it really muted the actual story, because this is supposed to be, this is a movie called Lincoln, and so you'd think that it's from Lincoln's point of view, but he's not actually in it as much as you'd assume for someone whose name is on the movie. It would be like John Wick, starring anyone but Keanu Reeves as everyone else other than John Wick. It's like, okay, that's not what I was expecting, and the individual scenes were quite interesting, particularly the scene towards the end of the film where he's having those negotiations with Tim Blake Nelson's Confederate vice president, I suppose, and just the debate there. Tim Blake Nelson is it Tim Blake Nelson? I think it's Tim Blake Nelson.
I think he's in this.
Yeah, Tim Blake Nelson as no, I'm thinking of Jackie Earle Haley, Alexander Stevens. He's very good at playing snide and but again, whilst it was nice to have someone who was being presented as an out-and-out villain, probably wasn't actually the case. And it felt out of place with the ebbing and flowing and political give and take that so much more of the movie was being presented as. And it just here's the other interesting thing for me that kind of tangled me at the last kind of part of the movie, where Lincoln is sitting down with Ulysses S. Grant, and Grant says, "You look about 10 years older, and it's only been a year." And Lincoln says about how he's got an age in his bones, and he's like talks about it, and the way that they kind of exit stage right Lincoln in the movie, the conversations that he has, and the little bits like leaving his gloves on the side, and people just and his sort of like manservant just watching him leave and being pensive about it. It was like, was he expecting to die? Did he arrange to be shot so that
there's a conspiracy theory I haven't heard before?
I mean, because there was a scene before about sort of like whether or not he would be indicted for whether or not his actions were legal or not, which again was a fascinating debate and question to have, and the way that he talked about it himself was really interesting. But then it was like, wait, what? Is this him getting out of? It's like securing his legacy by just ending it on his what? No,
I didn't take it that way. I felt I did think it was a little overwrought, because we all know what happened. We all know what happened to him.
Yeah,
That's famous. So he so we all knew he was going to die, and we all knew. Well, again, I didn't realize it was so close to the end of a war, frankly. But then again, I should. But we're not Americans, so why should we know these things? But it was just a filmmaker for me foreshadowing what was coming, and that was part of a hero worshipy kind of vibe that kind of started to bother me again at the end. It didn't. It was just Spielberg being his usual, not particularly subtle self.
Yeah, there were two particular instances where Spielberg came out, and there was that hero worship, melancholia kind of element at the end, and the just sudden, out of the blue bit of comedy. He always just injects this dumb bit of comedy somewhere, and it's a bit, and it's funny, incidentally, but it just doesn't fit in the rest of the movie, where James Spader is trying to have a conversation, and the guy he's talking to just goes to shoot him and misses, and James Spader is able to run back, grab his papers, and go back because the gun takes so long to load. It was a honest and funny scenario, but it doesn't fit anywhere else in the movie. It's like, okay, it was like in Minority Report, where Tom Cruise is being chased, and they barbecue some burgers with the jetpacks that they're doing. It's like, no, just yeah. I get that you want it to be funny, but pepper it through, not just one random hotspot. Come on.
I think I played a lot of his scenes for laughs, but I mean, I enjoyed James Spader's performance because it had kind of a slightly chaotic, humorous edge, which is what Spader does so beautifully well.
Yeah.
Look, I didn't. I can see your point, and I wouldn't criticize you for finding it dull in the same way that I would criticize someone for finding Oppenheimer boring, because it wasn't. And if you found it boring, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And your feelings are incorrect. So it does, I would say, though, you would need to have an interest in American politics and history, and potentially the Civil War. If you have zero interest in any of those things, if that sounds like a really bad night out for you, then I would probably steer well clear of this. It's a reasonable exploration of this character, who I assume was the way they said he was. I liked that they showed him being criticized. You know, the people around him really didn't like him or trust him.
I
It is
like
interesting to see
they
his
presented him as troubled and having these external debates with himself, with other people around, about the validity of his presidency and giving himself powers. It was very nice to see that presented. Again, how accurate it is, don't know.
But that idea of someone who's now held in the highest of possible esteems, at least in the United States, like he's the greatest president of all time. You know, people have been studying him. Everything's named after him. You know, and it's kind of crazy to go back and look at a film set contemporary with him and go, there are people who don't trust him. There are people who really don't like him. There are people who think he's dangerous. And that is a novel experience for someone who is so revered as Lincoln now, and maybe gives you a second's worth of hope that the people we think are horrible, unreliable, and dangerous today, maybe they're not so much, but I think they probably are.
That would be an interesting take on the Jesus Christ story from the Romans' point of view.
That would go down well. I'm sure they'd love that. Terrorist. Jesus Christ, terrorist. I'm not going to put my hand up to write or direct that one. It was an interesting film. I don't think it was a bad choice. This is a long way short of a worse choice we've had in recent months.
We have to go pretty far to get close to that crown. This is not a bad movie. It was I think in many ways it's a singularly focused movie in a similar vein as Oppenheimer, of, you know, the director writer having a very specific idea of how they're going to present this story, and not really caring about whether or not it's kind of access all areas or open to all audiences. It's like, if you're not interested in Lincoln, don't go and see a movie called Lincoln.
Yeah. If you know what you're going to get, right?
Yeah. And this just, for me, is a fascinating point of history. It was interesting political debate and seeing that. And I wish that we had more nuance and intrigue and genuine people willing to struggle with their political stance and their personal opinions in modern day, rather than, hey, okay, you gave me $100 million. Cool. Bye morals. So it was refreshing in that regard, but it just wasn't a movie for me, which I'm not going to hold against it.
No.
Yeah.
With that said, shall we pick for next week?
Please do. You have the key.
I was paralyzed with choice.
There's only one or two real options here. I mean, let's be honest.
Paralyzed. It was so many people in this movie that have done lots of other interesting things. I initially, like I said earlier, I was thinking about the Phantom Thread and following the Daniel Day-Lewis. And I've chosen not to. I actually gave it up to Michelle. Should we go high in Phantom Thread, or should we go low Low being, I can't remember exactly how, but we could have ended up watching Mannequin from with Kim Cattrall. You watched the sequel, I think.
I
A while
have
back.
watched Mannequin 1 and 2, and I have met one of the 12 writers for the Mannequin movie.
Oh, it makes me wish I had chosen it now, but I didn't. um, no,
Great
we are going to
soundtrack,
follow.
buddy. Great soundtrack.
There's nothing wrong with Mannequin. I just thought it would be like, I thought, well, I'm going to have to watch it too. I thought I would go with a controversial choice, and I'm going to quick give it a context. We talked about this last time. As we get towards the end of the year, one of the things we thought we might start to do is revisiting some of the more contentious films we've watched. And I mean contentious in stuff that we've disagreed on pretty strongly. And I think we're going to lead up to Batman vs Superman, because I think that might have been the biggest disagreement I could recall us having on a particular film. But this week's chain film will be one I think you and I had different perspectives on. And we are going to follow a very young Adam Driver to Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi.
Oh.
Now, I didn't like this film. I thought this film sucked, frankly, for the most part. But it is directed by one of George's favorite filmmakers in Rian Johnson.
Yes.
And I think it has kind of been rehabilitated somewhat after it came out. And everyone was a bit like, oh, that wasn't very good. After seeing what Abrams did with The Last Skywalker or whatever piece of shit he made. It was just like you're like, oh, The Last Jedi was pretty bad, and you're like, oh, hold my beer, I can make something worse, and he did. So, with the benefit of 6 years now since this came out, maybe it's worth me revisiting, and was it as bad as I remember it?
Who will come out with a changed point of view? Will it be Travis? Will it be me?
And of course, George has a myriad of options out of his film. Hamill, Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, Carrie Fisher, Oscar Isaac, Lupita Nyong'o, Andy Serkis, Donald Gleason, Rosemary Tran, Benicio del Toro, Frank Oz. He did a couple of films, so I think you'll have no problem. Gwendolyn Christie, everyone's in this. You'll have no trouble finding something interesting to focus on.
I already have a couple of ideas, but we shall see.
You can follow. There's a little guy who's credited as a writer called George Lucas. I think he did a couple of other things. Not sure. Maybe that could be a way out.
Jorge Lucas. Okay, yeah.
Anyway, it's a bit. We're jumping into the middle of a franchise here, but it's Star Wars. So, it should be fine.
Yeah, I'm sure we can catch up. We're not jumping into Ahsoka. It's fine.
Oh God, no. Should we talk then? Should we jump forward in time to something a little bit more contemporary? The newish release just came out a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Sympathy for the Devil.
Yes, absolutely.
As George noted at the start, it stars Nicolas Cage and Joel Kinnaman. Joel, of course, best known for RoboCop reboot, Suicide Squad, the first one. He was in House of Cards.
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage is a bit of a newcomer. You may not have heard of him yet. After being forced to drive a mysterious passenger at gunpoint, a man finds himself in a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, where it becomes clear that not everything is as it seems. It is directed by a gentleman named Yuval Adler, who has done nothing I've ever heard of before. So there's that. I think he's quite new.
Yeah.
Writer is a gentleman named Luke Paradise. Again, not someone I've ever heard of. He has no other credits to his name currently, but a shit ton of stuff in development. So who knows where he might end up. We meet Joel Kinnaman, who is credited as the driver, as he is dropping off his pregnant wife at the hospital.
Which isn't right. He's not dropping her off. She's already there.
He's at the hospital. His wife's at hospital. As he is getting out of his car in the hospital car park, Nicolas Cage, credited as the passenger, jumps into the back seat, and after some to and fro, pulls a gun and says, "Drive."
I'm your family now.
Proceeds from there. Now, I'm going to put my hand up again. I saw this 3 weeks ago. So my memory might be a little fuzzy on this to say that the trailer looked particularly intriguing. But what we end up with is not intriguing at all. And this is a giant Nicolas Cage-sized pile of shit, according to me. What did you make of it?
I don't think it was a pile of shit. I think it ended up being entirely by the numbers and giving so much away far, far, far too early. The name of the movie, Sympathy for the Devil. We are instantly told by that title and by the presentation of Joel Kinnaman, the driver, just wanting to be there for his wife's baby's birth. We are being told to sympathize with him. Sympathy for the devil. Okay, we instantly, he's going to be a fucking asshole. He's going to be a fucking asshole. He's going to have done something heinous. He's going to have done something bad. Nicolas Cage is on Nicolas Cage form. And he is obviously the wounded party, shall we say. He has a certain level of justification for what he's doing. But then even with the poster, revenge is a hell of a ride. Again, it gives away the story is like, no, come on. You're not doing anything here to maintain the suspense of mistaken identity. You're not doing anything. This is a weird kind of there's elements of Collateral by Michael Mann crossed with like the a bizarre heist movie or sort of like cat and mouse kind of almost very, 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 very Alfred Hitchcock light character narrative where it's they're trying to keep it all in a moving car, which is a good concept to actually get this back and forth between characters. But one character is painting to the walls with extremes. The other person is giving nothing away. And at every opportunity that they get out of the car, they have bigger drama that's just entertaining schlock rather than trying to be informed, interesting storytelling through visual. It's just, nah. All right. So it's not a bad movie. It's just like it doesn't do anything well. And it's every single element is like, okay. Yep. Anyone who didn't see the twists coming is dead.
I think this film leans on one thing and one thing alone, and that is its stars.
Yep.
Nicolas Cage has gone full Nicolas Cage.
Yep.
And I'm okay with that.
Yep.
Because Joel Kinnaman is a very effective straight man, for want of a better term.
Yep.
He plays the concerned father who feels he's been the victim of mistaken identity, as you've noted. The film basically tells you from the start that that's not the case anyway, but he plays it up for a while, so you can kind of suspend your disbelief long enough to go, okay, he's just he's just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And those two guys work well together, I think. Those guys, there's great chemistry. I'd like to see them in a film with an actual script. That would be intriguing to see. But that's where the good things in this film end, is those two guys' performances and their work together. Nicolas Cage going full Nicolas Cage would have worked if, again, with the right script. It just started to get a bit, because he was doing it in a film that had no script and it was badly written and badly directed. It started to just become a bit tiresome for me.
Yeah.
So it's a bit weird. I'm saying he was good, but his good was not backed up by the rest of the script of a director, and that kind of, in the end, wasn't enough to save it. The film it reminded me of most of all was History of Violence, the Viggo Mortensen film
And
from about
yeah,
10, 15 years ago,
yeah,
where he's this family man in a small town. All of a sudden, I think it's William Hurt who
yeah,
turns up, and he won an Oscar for like playing for 10 minutes, I think.
yeah,
And he's banging a band of gangsters because they chase him down because he was a gangster in a previous life and had done bad things, and he was this, he had to go full ultra violence on them.
yeah,
And that was basically the plot of his film. Collateral meets the
yeah,
history of violence, and you're like, wow, that's powerfully forgettable.
yeah,
Um, the set pieces that look like they should have been, yeah, really kind of turning points in the film just kind of fizzle out.
yeah.
Them in the car together just starts to go. It starts interestingly enough, and then just goes nowhere. It's like they just run out of. Well, what do we do with them now? I don't know.
The
Get
the
them.
the police officer pulling them over is like, okay, this could be interesting. No, no, it's not interesting.
He
It's
just kills him, and they keep moving. And then we move on to the diner, and you're like, okay, this could be an interesting scene. In the trailer, the diner scene kind of looked like it was going to be, someone had taken the diner scene from Pulp Fiction and turned it up to 11.
yeah,
And I'm like, I'm here for that, all right, but it just wasn't. It just, it really just went nowhere. It just kind of meanders along, and it's like, here's a cool looking setting and two cool looking actors doing cool sounding things, and
we're not
stuff
doing anything with it.
happens.
Yeah.
And then the ending was, as you said, incredibly predictable,
Hmm.
really powerfully underwhelming to me. Like, not just the fact that I knew it was coming. I mean, there's plenty of films we know where the end's coming, right? Like every Marvel film ever, we've known where the end was coming. But you want some emotional payoff there along with the cool action. The action wasn't even that cool. There was
No.
no emotional payoff. Like, the fact that do we bother putting the spoiler warning up? I'm not going to bother, but like the fact that the person who we're told is the devil from the title of a film
Yep.
ends up walking away,
Yep.
kind of it left me so empty, and I was so disappointed because it looked interesting. I'd read some convincing reviews around the place that said it was pretty decent for a
Hmm.
low budget film, and it just wasn't for me. I am, if you're being a little bit more generous than me, for me, this was a stunning missed opportunity for a director who had somehow managed to get his hands on two very talented actors and just
Hmm.
didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah. It as you say that, it actually makes me think. Yeah, this is a combination of one part Collateral, two parts History of Violence, with just a splash of The Usual Suspects and the reveal of Kaiser Soze, but where that was done with excellent nuance and subtlety. This they told us far too early, and even when the devil appeared, shall we say, it was underwhelming. And the fact that he gets away with everything that has happened is like, okay, I don't care, which is not how you want to be. You want to feel something. You want to feel like, oh, good, he survived, or my God, he's really gotten away with it. The fucker.
A nice twist might have been, well, some more context would have been good to start with. Maybe if we'd had a scene at the start of a film explaining, because you're giving it away anyway,
Mm,
giving us some background on who Nicolas Cage was, or why he might have been after Joel Kinnaman, or the fact that maybe even some foreshadowing that Joel Kinnaman wasn't exactly who he said he was, or something like that. Or at the end of a film, if you wanted to make it a little bit, raise the stakes a little bit, a nice light of twist might have been a very cliche twist. I'll pay it in advance, but like the fact that he gets a call from his wife, and Nicolas Cage has emailed her a cache of photos or videos or documents that prove that her husband is actually, a murderer or a gangster or something. At least that would have been something to have, kind of close the door on the film a little bit. That now Joel Kinnaman, horrible person, does end up suffering somewhat.
You know what I think they tried to do, but as you were saying that, I don't know if it worked. We were told sympathize with the devil. We're taking in that it would have been better if we had not followed Joel Kinnaman to start with, and we had actually just followed Nicolas Cage. And we had followed Nicolas Cage just turning up to the hospital, asking about this woman, finding out where she is, and then him just casually standing waiting and then going in. And we are depicted as revenge is a hell of a ride. Yes, absolutely. And this guy is hunting the driver, Joel Kinnaman. Leave it mysterious and dangerous that he's kind of watching this woman who's on the phone to Joel Kinnaman, like, oh, where are you? Why aren't you here yet? Blah, 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 blah. And he's watching her just silently. And then he's waiting and he gets into the car. So like, oh, this guy's fucked up. This guy's dangerous. By the end of the movie, we should have sympathy for Nicolas Cage.
There's so many ways they could have done this a whole lot better. I just think that we did not have the cattle on board. That the writer and director are obviously B movie caliber, at least at this stage of their careers, and somehow they got their hands on some pretty decent stars.
Yeah,
maybe it was filmed during the pandemic. When these guys were desperate for work, they couldn't go overseas. I don't know what it is, but I was very disappointed by this film, and I would recommend anyone who had read a positive review of it to treat those reviews with a healthy degree of skepticism, because they are very, very wrong. It's pretty average stuff.
And as just an extra side note, I'm sorry, but the sympathy for as a movie title, you have to bring your A game because of Chan-wook Park's sympathy for Lady Vengeance, sympathy for he did a whole thing about what they tried to do here, and they did it infinitely better.
There's also a cool Rolling Stones song, so it was a cool title for a movie, and you're like, what a disappointment.
Yeah.
From a sublime to a ridiculous, shall we? And move on to our Way Back When movie, which is not a disappointment in any way, shape, or form, unless you count Joe Blow copying our homework yet again.
Yes.
Last week, and making it a best film you've never seen a video about, Fortress.
Yep.
From 1992/93. I think it might have come out in the end, hence why it popped up last week. But last show, had you seen this before?
Yes, I had. This was one of the first gruesome 90s action movies that I have memory of watching, alongside things like RoboCop and Predator and Universal Soldier.
Wow, it's a quality selection there. So Fortress, in a future private underground fortress / prison, the inmates are computer controlled with CCTV, dream readers, and devices that cause pain or death. John and his illegally pregnant wife are inside, but want to escape before birth. That's actually a terrible synopsis. It's directed by Stuart Gordon, who was famous for writing Reanimator, which is a B-grade schlock horror classic. Writers Troy Neighbors, Steven Feinberg, David Venables, people I'm not familiar with. Our stars, the great, there can be only one, Christopher Lambert as John Brennick. It's a great 90s action film name, by the way. Lauren Lachlan as his wife, Karen. Kurtwood Smith in a fantastic performance as prison director Poe. And I'll give it to the Joe Blow video this last week, which is actually worth watching, by the way.
Yeah.
They make an interesting point that right these days, Kurtwood Smith, everybody thinks of him as the dad from that 70s show, I'll break my foot off in your ass. And that back in 1992, he was the bad guy from RoboCop, Bitches leave. Like that was like it, and now he's sort of become this lovable, character. And you're like, oh no, he was a badass back then. Clifton Collins Jr. And Vernon Wells, of course, from the Mad Max films, makes a brief appearance as well. For the Australians at home, there is also a cameo by Warwick Capper in one of the scenes, which for some reason doesn't make the trivia of this film, but it should. Those who don't know who that is, Warwick Capper was a very flamboyant champion footballer of the 1980s and early 90s. who
Okay.
tried to make a transition from being a footballer into being an actor, musician, stripper, you name it. He's probably tried it. There's a whole story there, but we won't go into that one. He's in one scene at the front of a crowd of prisoners. I, like you, I remember seeing this and watching this on video at my
Yeah.
friend's place in about 1993 or 94 and just being like, this film's so cool. And I like the sort of dystopian future setting that we start with of, the one child policy and then trying to escape to Canada and
Yeah.
hide her pregnancy and stuff. You're like, well, Americans trying to escape a dystopian United States into Canada. This is like The Simpsons have predicted the future.
I'm kind of curious as to why they would be stopping people leaving, though. Is it like, why?
I mean, I guess it's maybe kind of a Cold War-y kind of thing, like back in those days. You're like, you always just look at it in hindsight. You're like, why the fuck did the communist bloc, if people wanted to go live in the West? Well, it was a bad look, So maybe that was it. But also, so the movie could happen is why they wanted to stop them.
Damn my brain.
So Lauren is caught with being pregnant for a second time. They lost their first child.
Yeah.
So despite that, they're not allowed to have another one. It seems like quite a severe punishment for having a second child. But Christopher Lambert, who is a former special forces soldier
Yes.
of some description,
he has a certain set of skills, shall we say.
set of skills, as they always do in these films. He is sent to the Fortress, which is a high-tech underground prison, where he starts out dancing with Werner Wells in a hell of a fight, which is actually a really cool fight scene.
It's pretty good, isn't it?
I think a lot of the fight scenes in this film are actually pretty good, and it made me think to myself, I say this a lot. The films of some of the elements of this aren't made often anymore. If you think about it, like I don't know what the rating was in this in the US when it came out, or Australia. I could look that up, but like I would have guessed it would be pushing an R rating, an R rating in the US. It says.
Yeah.
So R-rated films are rare because obviously they can be seen by less people and hence make less money. But for a straight action film to be this gruesome and this violent, I feel like that's kind of gone by the wayside. What do you think?
I agree with you, and I think that this has got another element of lost to the sands of time. Good old-fashioned, just untrained fighters. Everything's all about martial arts and trained fighters. I'm bored with that. I want two people who don't know how to fight and are just throwing wild haymakers and just kicking each other in the balls because they just want to get the fight over. Just a dirty fight. And that's what these fights are. They're good, dirty fights. And it feels a bit more believable in that regard. And
it does, yeah. That's what I mean about that fight scene between Werner Wells and his offsider are terrorizing and trying to take advantage of the character played by Clifton Collins, and because he's a decent man, John Brennick steps in to defend him and has this incredible fight scene with them. As you say, it feels brutal. It almost feels close enough to real, in the sense that he's not a John Wickian type of character who's got all the counters and or like a Neo from the Matrix. He's another Keanu character, or even Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise in the Mission
Ethan
Impossible
Hunt.
movies,
it doesn't feel choreographed. And I feel like so many fight scenes are both bloodless and choreographed these days. This had an R rating in Australia, by the way, so I don't know what I was doing seeing this from the video store. There was obviously some sort of we pulled the shifty to get this one across the line, apparently, because I was definitely not 18. But they're a lot less violent, or they're choreographed now, and they feel fake.
Yeah,
it feels like a fake fight. And I know you really enjoyed the last John Wick film. It felt so bloodless to me. I would like to see an R-rated John Wick. I don't know if it was R-rated. I feel like it wasn't, because it wasn't. No. It's violent, but it feels no impact to the violence, if that makes sense.
Well, just look at the cars; they're bouncy, so you know, nothing.
The
Nothing.
car, we're not going to go. We're not going to try and relitigate that one. But I enjoyed that, and this about this film. The fight scenes felt visceral, real.
Mhm.
You make a good point. They feel unchoreographed, like people who don't know how to fight, and they're
Mm.
bloody. And that
Mm.
the violence has stakes. To where the prisoners in this prison have things inserted in their mouths called an intestinator, which
Such a good name.
uh, and they can cause them pain to stop them doing what they're doing, or in certain circumstances, it can explode and kill
Yeah.
them, which, is a bit of a nod and a wink from the filmmakers to Escape from New York, I think. But if you're going to rip off someone, rip off the best.
Well, you've got there was a string of we're going to have inconvenient explosives planted on you to keep you under control. There's Escape from New York, and there was The Running Man with those shock collars that just make them go blow up their heads if they go beyond the perimeter breach.
Yeah. So if like the computer intestinate them. I enjoyed that. Just to be clear, John Wick 4 was an MA-15 in Australia, so it is a different level of violence in this film.
Yeah.
The
Now let's
sets,
talk a little bit because we've talked a little bit about the build up of the one child policy, which is I remember vaguely hearing about that and the legend of the one child policy in China and how it was their extreme radical way of maintaining their population growth. Okay, and then this movie came out using that as a bit of a launching point for that. That's interesting. Okay, I kind of like that. The underground prison, everything kind of comes together. So, like, I kind of like that as an idea. And then we get Kurtwood's character and what they do with these illegal babies and how they mutate them and morph them and trying to evolve them into something else, and then then they go maybe they go too far with the leftovers that become the super soldiery things that don't really seem very super.
they're pretty easily taken care of.
But still,
It is an interesting idea of a private prison, then basically the children born in that prison becoming the property of the corporation, the Mentel Corporation, the Mental Corporation. Thank you.
crime
Not very
does
subtle.
not pay.
It's and it probably speaks to a little bit of a paranoia at the time of maybe the idea of private prisons are a bit new at the time. I suspect maybe they were, and
Yeah.
all those fears were proven correct because they are shit.
Yep.
So I don't think they quite claim ownership of children, but give them time. It, the escape the escape plot is interesting and fascinating. I really enjoyed actually the role of the guy with glasses. Is it
Jeffrey Combs' character.
Jeffrey Combs, who I think is the star of the Reanimator films, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
I think so.
And also a regular in Deep Space Nine. So
Yep.
to you, popped up in The Frighteners as well. Of course, he did. We forget that. No, I'd like to see Peter Jackson go back to making horror films. By the way, get away from these highfalutin stuff, right? But he is actually really cool in the role as kind of the D-Day is his character's name. He's the kind of techno geek of the group of, who manages to figure out how using the crystal thing that gets stolen from the Kurtwood Smiths. They get a map of a prison and figure out how to escape, and how to remove their intestinators so they can fight back against the evil corporation who are holding them prisoner. Initially, John feels that Karen escaped the prison, the police on the border. He finds out later that no, she's in prison with him. It just makes him much more determined to get out. And the escape sequence is pretty well done. I kind of like the computers going offline and going crazy, and the prisoners in the elevator all trying to get out in the elevator, and the elevator dropping, and people trying to jump over bridges and falling off and stuff. It was fun.
It was chaotic. It felt quite good, and I loved in each time that they did it. They just said random intestination, and it's like that idea of just controlling everyone because like one person mistakes and just random lottery pain. That's cool. Kind of a cool concept to have in a sci-fi prison as well.
And does make him look like a serious asshole, which is what you want, because
And
you would.
he's a psychopath. Like just the way that he manipulates Brennick's wife, and it's just cringy and horrible, and you hate him.
It is a bit cheesy though. Like he's eventually revealed to be kind of a robot of some description, or like a cyborg. He's enhanced. How enhanced and how much man is still left? He's now more machine than man. He's never quite revealed, but the idea that he just happens to fall in love with Brennick's wife and wants her to move in with him it's a bit random, but the movie needs to happen. So
Yes.
it's a plot device. It didn't. But if there's a word that describes this film, it is fun.
Yes.
It is just fun. I mean, it is stupid.
Yep.
It is fun. Like the final sequence with the truck, which apparently is edited out of certain editions of the film.
Yeah.
They escape from the prison in a prime mover truck thing, but it's actually got cameras and robotics inside, so it's still controlled by the prison, computer. Yes. Mind you, I move 10 meters away from my phone and my Bluetooth headphones go, nah, fuck off. Like, but this thing's like 600 Ks away from the fucking computer, but their Bluetooth's still connected. How do I get that Bluetooth on my headset?
Not only that, they went to Mexico. They got across the border.
Anyway, the computer takes over the tank again at a very convenient point in time when Karen's about to give birth, and kills Clifton Collins' character. I forget the actual character's name. Nino. Kills him, runs him over, tries to kill Karen, and Christopher Lambert is forced to dispatch it with a flamethrower.
Yeah.
In the end, which he does effectively.
Yep.
You know what? It's ridiculous, but they had earned that ridiculous ending by being ridiculous from the start and doing it with a completely straight face.
Yes.
And why anybody would edit that ending out, I'm very sad to hear it was Australia that edited it out, because that ending is great.
Australia likes to, ruin things for people.
Well, I'm thinking of a film like The Descent. If you haven't seen it, it's terrifying. But in America, they edited out the actual ending, which is quite dark.
Yeah.
And you look at it, if you leave it at a certain point, it's quite an uplifting ending. But that's why it was edited that way in the US. But I've never heard of it happening here before.
Well, I mean, the Australia board, famously deleted out whole chunks of the South Park video game, and so they replaced it with a crying koala.
That was telling someone about that the other day. That was actually one of the highlights of the game for me. I was very glad that the wheel sent us back to Fortress. I enjoyed this immensely, and if there was a way we could bring these type of films back, this was made for $15 million.
Yeah.
Which was not a huge budget at the time.
No, but it made 48. 48
enough
million.
To make a sequel.
Yeah.
And I think it found a big audience on VHS, but
yeah,
maybe that's the thing these days is you can't find an audience on DVD or VHS, so the chances are so much lower because this is gonna go straight to streaming probably.
Yeah.
If you made a film like this today with a big great action star of the likes of not Lambert, but someone of his ilk today who I can't think of
Jason
Mayhem, something like that. Yeah, and it's gonna end up on Tubi or something, right? Or Crackle, because it's if you're not lucky and it doesn't land on one of the big streamers. And how are you making your money back there, right? Like it's maybe it's the nature of a beast these days.
Yeah.
Shall we spin the wheel?
Spin the wheel, yes.
And find out what year we are going back in time to this week. So the wheel is spinning. And we've got some interesting choices this week. And okay, we are going back a very, very long way.
Oh no.
Okay. We are going to be watching the 1973 retro action movie, The Doll Squad.
The Doll Squad.
If I didn't think we get copyright struck yet again, I would share the trailer. A squad of beautiful government agents tries to capture saboteurs. It is available in its entirety on YouTube. So that is something to look forward to.
The Doll Squad. Okay. Wow. Oh, this looks. Before Charlie's Angels, there was the Doll Squad.
Oh, come on, we got to do this. We'll risk. We'll roll the dice. Hang on a second. I'll do that again. Make sure I hit the sound button. Yep, cool. Okay. So for those who are listening to the podcast, maybe you can listen to this, or maybe watch it on YouTube yourself.
Oh, I spelled that wrong. Oh, where's the sound? Why is there no sound? Oh, I've lost Travis's sound too. Oh boy, I think this is a good way of avoiding copyright strike. There's this has got to have been like inspiration for Tarantino's Fox Force 5. Oh, this is. Oh, Travis can't hear me. Interesting. Well, hopefully you guys can hear me, but the trailer must be ending soon. Oh no, this looks really bad. There's women at gunpoint in very permed hair and onesies, maybe. Oh, beach combat. We know it. Francine York, Herb Robbins, Anthony Eiley, John Carter of Mars, Tura Satana, William Baghdad, Michael Ansara, with special guest Lisa Todd and Karate. Wow, this is yep. Wow, those unitards are impressive. Can you hear me again, Trav? I'm guessing you can't hear me. Video. All right. Well. There we go. I can hear you.
Okay, I got you now. Right.
Cool. That was an awkward 2.5 minutes of silence. Me doing commentary.
Sorry about that, people. For some reason, the sound went out in my headphones there, but I encourage everyone to look up the Doll Squad trailer on YouTube. Looks like a blast.
I was saying it looks like that could very well have been some of the inspiration for Fox Force 5.
I would not be surprised for a second. It looks like trash, but the trivia on IMDb says Aaron Spelling got the idea for Charlie's Angels after attending the premiere of this film.
Wow. Okay.
So this predates Charlie's Angels. It's not.
Yeah. Well, the posters for it said before Charlie's Angels, there was the Doll Squad.
Quentin Tarantino has said this film was a strong influence for the Deadly Viper Assassination Squad. So it looks like the kind of thing he would enjoy. But anyway, that is next week, or next fortnight. And if you feel like watching, it's there. It's on YouTube. I did not post it. I am not violating copyright.
Nope.
Somebody else did that one. So that is the way back when. Just to be honest with everybody, I had trouble finding films that were released this week in 1973 that anyone would find or had heard of. So it is more of a generic film released in 1973, but specifically around this time that year. So we do our best given the time difference. Yeah, so many years ago.
Unbelievable. Now, have you got fodder for Binge Browse Burn, sir?
I do. I had to have a conversation with Michelle. I go, what have you been watching the last couple of weeks? Like,
yeah, it's like, it's all blurred into one. I don't know what it is. There's that thing with the.
I watch a lot of YouTube.
Yeah,
because YouTube is not affected by the writer's strike. Which is finally sounds like it might be over. Which is
after 148 days.
The actors are still out, so
Yeah.
At least it means is I'm a big fan of the John Oliver type shows. Michelle loves Saturday Night Live, so I'll give us something to watch. But what did come out recently? The new season of The Morning Show.
Yes.
On
Apple TV.
On Apple TV, the Reese Witherspoon and Jennifer Aniston TV, call it production. It's the third season. Season 2 kind of dealt largely, I think, with a pandemic from memory.
There was a lot of the Me Too movement or something, because Steve Carell's character was...
That really occupied season 1.
Oh, okay.
That kind of really reflected the Me Too movement and kind of, those sort of guys, especially a lot of the news guys who got busted doing that crazy shit. That does carry over to a degree into season 2, and Steve Carell is still in the show in season 2. Spoilers, he dies in season 2. It's been out for a year and a half or something, so I'm not to be blamed for that. This season, we look like we're moving into things like hacking and that sort of thing. That seems to be the main. We're only 3 episodes. I only have seen the first 3 episodes of this season. I don't know. Season 4 might have been released by now, actually. So that's kind of cool. It's a slow start to this season. Episode 1 just kind of meanders along into episode 2 before it really starts to get to the point. There is some Elon Musk criticism in here. The season starts with Billy Crudup and Jennifer Aniston's characters going into space on a billionaire's rocket. Who could that possibly be referencing? Take your pick of the billionaires. By end of episode 2, it's really starting to crack on with its story in this season, and episode 3 continues that on. It's dealing with some racial issues as well. So this is one of those sort of not quite ripped from the headlines type shows, but it does tend to try and reflect the issues of the day.
Okay.
And so, look, if you liked season 1 and 2, I think it's well worth picking up season 3 for a look if you hadn't seen The Morning Show before. I would recommend going back to season 1 starting. Season 1 was fantastic. Season 2 not quite as good, but still pretty good. So I would rate The Morning Show. I would put this in the binge category because if it were all available, it would have been binged.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting choice. All right, I am going to stick with Apple TV as well because I'm slowly but surely making my way through. Just finished season 1 of Invasion, and the new season is currently showing, and it's a week-by-week thing. Earth is visited by an alien species that threatens humanity's existence. Events unfold in real time through the eyes of 5 ordinary people across the globe as they struggle to make sense of the chaos unraveling around them. So far, so normal. And that is pretty much a good descriptor for the show. It is created or co-created by the man who
Kinberg.
proved failing upwards, Simon Kinberg. Yes. The man behind the death of the X-Men movies. It's largely a paint by numbers kind of thing. In the first episode, we've got our big name of Sam Neill, but he is swiftly dispatched. And we end up coming with other actors that I certainly have not known any of their work. The only other known person in there for me is another character who seems to die pretty quickly, and that's Rinku Kokichu, who was she played Bam Bam in The Brothers Bloom. She was also in Pacific Rim as well, and Babel. So she's gotten around, but she doesn't really have much screen time in this beyond the stereotypical lots of videos of my lover who has gone away. It's a slow burn story, and after one season, you still don't really know what's going on. I've got my theories, and so far, every single one of them has been generally proven right. But this is my superpower. This is my blessing and my curse. I do these things so you don't have to. It's quite well produced. The performances are quite good. There are a number of things in it where you just, wait a minute. Why has that happened? Oh, because reasons. Cool. And there are some elements of kind of hack story, and they're trying to be nuanced. You can see everyone involved trying, and that's half the problem. Doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel flowing. The synopsis that I said, it says events unfold in real time through the eyes of 5 ordinary people. That is not true. It's not real time. That suggests to me something along the lines of 24, where it's like yes, the scene may change, but it's following on. But that's not what's happening here, ladies and gentlemen. I have no clue how long it is from the start of the movie, start of the TV show to the end of season 1. I don't know how much time has elapsed there, because it seems like people can have Dungeons and Dragons style, where they can do a long rest and whoop, you get new day, new day, new day. Elsewhere, it's fine, it's good, it's perfectly fine browse-worthy stuff. Doesn't do anything bad. It's not offended my sensibilities in any way. It just hasn't also kicked it up a gear to go, all right, we've set the world. We've introduced these characters, which they've not done a great job of introducing. But there's enough little nuggets of storyline going through that you kind of go, okay, I'm still interested. I'm still interested. One season's down. How have I not been given more information yet?
So it sounds like putting this maybe in the browse category.
It is definitely browse, 100% browse. Even if it was like season 1 is all out, but I don't want to watch it all in one go because long episodes and slow. Even the action sequences that there aren't lots of are not very well filmed, and they're not very engaging. But the concept that's going on, and if they play with things the way that I believe that they are going to, could result in something a little bit different to your typical alien invasion story.
Well,
but
that would be nice.
I keep on reminding myself, Simon Kinberg.
Look, I'm going to give Simon a slight pat in the back here. Now, as a director, he has been catastrophically bad.
Yes.
Dark Phoenix, the 355, and the 2 feature films he's directed, they were not good. As you sort of noted, he tended to kind of kill off the whole Fox X-Men universe.
Mm-hmm.
But he did write the screenplay for some decent films, including Days of Future Past, the first Sherlock Holmes film with Robert Downey Jr., The Last Stand, the X-Men film. A lot of people liked that.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a lot of people liked that. Very successful. He wrote and created the Star Wars Rebels TV series, which I have never seen and have no intention of seeing.
Nope.
But I think a lot of people liked him. It was very successful. Well, by Disney Star Wars standards anyway. So maybe he's a Zack Snyder type character in the sense that good at ideas, good writer, but needs a firm hand in terms of a very talented director. I don't know. But anyway, that's Simon. If you're out there and you're listening, I'm open to job opportunities.
I also wonder about the success of Star Wars Rebels. That generally seems to be credited more to Dave Filoni than other people. But
don't know, it wasn't there. I just know that people like it. I don't know why. It's a kids show, but
well, if you got to the final season of that one and you want more, watch Ahsoka.
And well, I mean, that's it. Now you have to do your homework for Star Wars as well.
Yep, you definitely do. I'll tell you something that I feel it's been a while since there was a Marvel movie, hasn't there?
It has been a little bit. They've kind of taken their foot off the pedal a little bit. Back in when did Guardians 3 come out? I can't remember. It was like April or May or something.
Yeah, I think so. And we haven't got the Loki comes out next month, I think. Maybe.
But we do. We are every day brings us closer to the Marvels.
Ooh.
Which could have chosen a worse time to drop one of their least successful characters. May 5th, by the way, was May. So we are coming up on 5 months since that. Which is probably what you should be you should be doing for your things, your films to come out, but that's not what we're used to. Interesting time for the Marvels to be coming out when I'm not sure who's looking forward to this.
I don't really see people hankering for the next Captain Marvel movie, but
in fairness, even if it weren't Captain Marvel and Miss Marvel, who was in the kids' TV show, but a lot of people liked the TV show. I don't know. But even if it weren't some of their lesser characters who've been done pretty questionably up to this point in time, I think a lot of people are kind of done with Marvel right now. I think they really need to go down to Hall of Mirrors and have a good hard look at themselves and figure out what they do next, because I think they're losing people.
Absolutely. Disney is very guilty of that at this stage. They've run Star Wars into the ground in many ways. They've run Marvel into the ground in many ways, purely because they have just pumped so much content and not being gatekeepers of quality.
Exactly. And the Nick Fury show was the lowest rated, least watched Marvel show of all time. No one liked it. It's something's got to change down there, I think.
Now yes, go for it.
Second one is I was on my pile of shame for a long time. That is we have been working our way through the final season of Better Call Saul. I think I watched up until the mid-season break initially when it came out. And there was a second half of it. It came out several months later, and for some reason I missed that. And so we are not quite finished yet. We've got 2 episodes to go, but I wanted to mention it just in case anybody was like me and they just gave it a miss or never got around to it, and say, do watch the final season, though. It's a weird one.
Okay.
In the sense that they set up for the second last season was with this character, Lalo Salamanca, who is this incredibly capable and vicious and charming, a deadly member of the Salamanca family who blames Gus Fring for attempting to kill him and for trying to kill his uncle, and does not want. Is sort of been trying to hunt down evidence so he can prove to the Dons that he's working against them and kill him. At the same time, Saul has to represent him at one point in time and gets into some hijinks with Lalo. And so you know that they're going to come back together again. As in, Saul's going to get caught in the middle of that meat grinder between Lalo and Gus Fring. And Lalo is one of the best characters they've created in this show, and they've created a lot of great characters. But that all kind of builds up, and it's in the traditional Vince Gilligan style of turning the pressure up, where you're edge of your seat stuff. It resolves at the mid-season finale.
Okay.
That antagonist who they've set up, that situation comes to a conclusion. And so you're kind of going, what are they going to do for the rest of the season? The rest of the season kind of jumps forward to Saul all the way through the series. We have little snippets of Saul's life post-Breaking Bad. The second half of the last season deals probably 70, 80, 90% of those episodes are dealing with Saul in his post-Breaking Bad life, which is shot in black and white, which is an interesting way of telling what you're looking at. Am I looking at pre-Breaking Bad or post-Breaking Bad? Color pre, post, black and white. It's not bad per se, because I mean, El Camino was interesting to watch because that was what happened to Jesse after Breaking Bad, and this is what happened to Saul after Breaking Bad. It's just not as compelling as the stuff that was happening in the first half of the season.
Do you think
Sorry, did it need it to be compelling?
I mean, do you think it is this kind of coda is needed, or could you have done without it?
Probably. The only reason this coda is needed is the show sets up one angle, which you're kind of thinking about the whole way through the series is we have Saul's girlfriend / wife later, Kim Wexler, played by Rhea Seaborn, who's fantastic in this series. And she is just, again, Vince Gilligan just pulls these fucking incredible characters out of his ass. So you've really built an emotional connection to Kim by this point in the season. And you kind of find she's not in Breaking Bad. So the question is, does she die? Does she survive? So that's the coda. The coda is there to really the only open question in the coda is what happens to Kim?
Okay.
And we've had an answer to that 3 episodes before the end. So they've kind of, in a sense that we know her fate. And, you're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I thought you might wait till the last episode for that. But no, they haven't. So, look, I mean, a lot of people have said the ending was very good. So we've got 2 episodes to go. We'll get there in the end. And I will report back once we finally find out if they stuck the landing. I'm just saying that it's a very strange final season. There is a sugar hit, though. I'll look, and I don't think it's a huge secret now, but there is a cameo from Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul as Walter White and Jesse Pinkman. And it's an incredible sugar rush seeing these 2 characters on screen again. And you just suddenly go, oh, that's what the show was about. They had the most incredible chemistry together, those 2.
They were selling on the streets.
Just 5 minutes of them again at the end was not even at the end. 5 minutes of them back playing those characters again was like, oh, what a joy! But that makes it worth watching. But the rest of it, it's odd. It's in the soft binge category for now, just because I've watched 6 seasons. I need to know what happens at the end.
Yeah. Okay. My last one is another soft binge. And it is the final season of Sex Education on Netflix. This one, they've had 4 seasons, and it's been wonderful, effervescent, daydream-like stories of high school it's English, but it's not quite English. It's Americanized English school system of awkward people growing up, being obsessed with sex and being obsessed with life and relationships and difference. It's funny, it's heartfelt, it's honest, it is wonderfully LGBTQI appropriate in its acceptance of everyone and presentation of people. They are wonderful, delightful characters. And season 1 knocked it out of the park for me. Season 2 was strong. Season 3 was good. Season 4, it's the denouement. It's the end. and it's sad to see it come, but at the same time, it's time for it to go, especially considering after watching Sex Education season 4, you suddenly go, wait a minute, half of that cast was in the Barbie movie. You had Emma Mackey, who played one of the Barbies. You had Nichutu Gatwa, who was one of the Kens, and he is going to be the new Doctor Who after this David Tennant revisit thing that's going on. And Connor Swindells was the assistant who was running around with Will Ferrell for Mattel during the movie. So it's kind of like, I know all those people. And I knew them before Barbie. Asa Butterfield is still solid as Otis Milburn. Gillian Anderson is just a fucking treasure that it just is continuing to get better and better with age. And her character of Jean Milburn has gone from this wonderful, very sex positive, sex therapist, almost hippie kind of mum who just wants to be a good mum, to, in this episode, she's dealing with postpartum depression and a relationship with a sister who's come back and struggling to be a full-time mum and still wanting to have more than that in her life. And she is just absolutely fucking glorious in this role. This was a perfect person to portray a brilliantly written character across all 4 seasons. True delight. Absolutely wonderful. I cannot wait to see what Gillian Anderson does next, because she just keeps on going from strength to strength. Wonderful.
I had heard some people criticizing the new season as being a bit of a letdown compared to the previous ones.
I will pay that. Compared to the previous ones, yes. And it is very much a wind down. One of the disappointments for me is the Maeve Wiley side of the story. At the end of season 3, she gets this internship in a very prestigious writing college in America, where she goes off, just as her and Otis have kind of admitted and had their first true kiss together. And we pick up from there, and we have basically a cameo by what's his face? He was Eugene Levy's son.
Jason Biggs?
Huh?
Not American Pie.
No, real Eugene Levy's real son, and they were in Schitt's Creek together. He played David in that, and he portrays Maeve's teacher. He's a dick. He's an asshole. He's not a good tutor because he doesn't know how to fucking talk to students. He doesn't know how to engage with them, and it just seems like he's being very selfish and self-centered all the time. It's like, okay, I don't really see why they have created this character, because it's not really driving Maeve. Other things pull her back rather than drive her on. And there's a big difference on that energy. So that was a disappointment. But apart from that, overall, it's good. There's definitely that element of, okay, we want to also get everyone to a happy or happy-ish ending. And yes, the puns, the jokes are intentional, ladies and gentlemen. This is a show called Sex Education. I did say it's nice to see them come, and happy endings. Thank you very much. I'm here all night. I'm glad that this has ended. I would have been happy for it to end at the end of season 3. This wasn't a disappointment. It hasn't come back for one final round and shat on everything that it had. The actors are still solid in their performances, and the characters have continued to develop nicely. And the actors get an opportunity to really show some good stuff. The only person who doesn't really get a chance to break out and do something different is Asa Butterfield as Otis, because so much of the show hinges on his awkwardness. He's not really allowed to be much more than that because of his role as kind of a cog in the center for everything else, all the other interesting things to happen. He is important for each story to persist, but he's, no one's interested in the cog. Everyone's interested in what comes out the other end. It's a soft binge. It's still good. I still recommend that anyone should at least try season 1 because it's charmingly awkward, funny, and heartfelt. And there are scenarios where you feel for these kids and you feel for it in so many delightful ways. There's moments of just pure elation and joy and absurdity and honest, heartfelt fun. It's really well done coming of age. I appreciate it.
So it sounds like from a fan's perspective, they've stuck the landing.
Overall, they've stuck the landing. Yeah, it's no finale is ever gonna fully satisfy and be the best because it's just not how it is. You get the come down, and that's what this is. It's kind of the come down after the load hits, and the way that season 3 ended was Jackson Pollocking all over the walls. This is the cleanup and the come down. That's what it is. But it's good.
Good stuff. That's one for fans.
Yeah. I think that brings us to the end.
It does.
Yeah. I will just quickly throw out one little grenade. There's been a little bit of talk online for negative conversations around Martin Short and Steve Martin recently. And that inspired me to go back to a little forgotten gem. Little one. Inner Space, ladies and gentlemen.
It's a classic.
Great movie. If you get the chance, watch it. It's on Apple TV. Watch it. It's great fun. Martin Short is hilarious in it. Dennis Quaid. Socially, his relationship and the way that he is as a drunkard womanizer for the big portion of it, not appropriate anymore for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Meg Ryan is lovely in it, but it just goes absurd by the end of it, and it's just fun. Martin Short is brilliant in it, honestly. Worth the price of admission.
One of my favorites as a kid.
Yeah. But that brings us to the end of the show, ladies and gentlemen. We talked about our chain movie of the week, which was Lincoln by Steven Spielberg. We talked about Sympathy for the Devil with Nicolas Cage and Joel Kinnaman. And this time, so many years ago, in the Wayback Machine, we went to a great, long-lost action style Fortress. The week after, we will be talking about Star Wars The Last Jedi, as well as The Doll Squad as our Wayback Machine movie, and we will have a newer movie to talk about. I am saying right now, ladies and gentlemen, it is not going to be us talking about Spy Kids Armageddon. I watched the first 5 minutes of it, and already that was more than enough, and I am really disappointed in Rodriguez. So it'll be something else.
I have a couple of suggestions that we'll have to tune in next time to find out.
Next time. But on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been a delight, as always, hanging out with my friend and with you. Until next time, good night.
Good night.